These last words of the Gospel strike true with the feast that we celebrate today. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. And I think I say that because of the feast of St. Jane Frances de Chantal, foundress of the Visitation Sisters. Jane Ferrier, as she was known, was married to the Baron de Chantal and took the name Jane de Chantal in her married life, having 6 children, 2 of whom died at birth, but raising the others. And as a wife, a mother, dedicated to that vocation, did so beautifully, teaching her children in the ways of faith. And when her husband died, she considered joining a religious order, but her spiritual director, Francis de Sales, persuaded her not to live a single life, to live a dedicated single life, contributing to the poor, assisting the poor. And at another point in time, she did found the Visitation Sisters, the religious order that still is prevalent today, that reaches out to the poor, to the needy, to the disenfranchised. And it was Francis and Jane, in their writings to one another, that established this religious order and established her second vocation, if you will. It is rare that one has one vocation in life, but oftentimes some can have a second vocation. And Jane's first vocation as wife, mother, was something that she treasured and cherished, but was something also that she was called to do at that point in time. And then later on in her life, was called to be a woman of prayer, be a woman of service, and be a woman of great faith in all that she did. And in founding the Visitation Sisters, of seeing Christ in the poor, seeing Christ in the other, and being Christ for the other, especially those who are marginalized, disenfranchised, the poor. And indeed, as a people of faith, we are called to be of service to one another, to challenge one another, to help one another, to recognize first and foremost our own shortcomings, but then perhaps to call out the shortcomings of others in a charitable way, so as to win minds and hearts, to win someone to conversion, ultimately commending them to God if all else fails. And Jesus in today's gospel has that process that he lays out for the disciples to move in that direction. And ultimately he establishes what for us is the Sacrament of Reconciliation. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That idea of binding and loosing, of forgiving and holding fast, of recognizing that when we go to the Sacrament of Reconciliation, we have the opportunity to be freed of those things that are holding us back, that are binding us, if you will, and to be unbound by the sacrament, to be unbound by God's grace, God's mercy, and God's love in the Sacrament of Reconciliation. You know, somebody asked me one time what my favorite thing to do as a priest is. And I said, well, in a broad sense, I said my favorite thing, it's not necessarily always a happy thing initially. My 2 most fulfilling things that I do as a priest, I told them, was that in celebrating a Mass of the Resurrection, a funeral Mass, in hearing confessions, things that you wouldn't necessarily think would spark joy necessarily. Yet, when we think of it, when we think of those moments, when we come to the Lord in our brokenness, and we receive healing, when we receive hope, when we receive the promise of new life, whether it's in resurrection or whether it's in reconciliation, these moments can be for us moments of great grace that we enter into. That when we lose a loved one, we commend them to God. We ourselves are heartened by that commendation of giving them over to God, of letting God be God in that moment. and when we avail ourselves of the Sacrament of Reconciliation, to be freed from those things that are holding us back from fully loving God and neighbor. And as a confessor and as a celebrant of these sacraments, I certainly have a great appreciation, have developed a great appreciation over 25 years of hearing confessions, of celebrating funerals, of bringing somebody from a point of brokenness to a point of healing and hope and new life, whether it's in reconciliation or reconciliation. And as a people of faith, we are called to be a people of reconciliation with one another and with our God, to commend ourselves to the Lord first and foremost, to offer ourselves in service to the Lord in our brothers and sisters, but first to be freed of those things that are holding us back from fully doing this. So let us indeed have the courage, through the intercession of St. Francis de Chantal, to seek out our vocation, to look for the Lord where he may be found, and in doing so, of fulfilling the call that God has placed on our hearts, to reach out to our brothers and sisters, to help them in their need, and so, in turn, to save our own soul.